All right.
Wasn't even expected to live, and she took excellent care of him to the point where he's now, and he was her pride and joy.
Please help the police with any given information.
Telling myself she's probably away and will be returning soon.
Welcome back to Fame Drop. On the morning of April 6, 2023, something horrifying went down. A young woman collapsed in her own apartment, bleeding out in front of her toddler son. That woman was 23-year-old Brianna McCoy. She was found lifeless from gunshot wounds. And right there, just feet away, her 18-month-old son Xander was sitting quietly in his playpen, alone, scared, surrounded by the aftermath of something no child should ever witness.
It's a lot for all of us. I know everyone had their relationship with Bree, whether it's, for a second, for years, for weeks. I know I only knew her for 3 months, and it hurts me dearly.
Cops rushed to the Coach Light Square complex in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where they were met with a heartbreaking scene and a major clue. Turns out, Brianna was gunned down by her own boyfriend after she told him something he couldn't handle, something that hit a nerve so deep he snapped. He shot her right there in the home they shared. Then he vanished, triggering a full-on nationwide manhunt. But as detectives dug deeper, they found out this wasn't some heat-of-the-moment meltdown. No, this had been brewing, and no one saw it coming. This is the tragic story of Brianna McCoy, a young mother whose life was stolen way too soon. Her story unfolded in Bridgeport, Connecticut, a city with grit, diversity, and strong community roots. But even with all its charm and coastal beauty, Bridgeport still had a dark side. Violent crimes were way too common in 2023, and Brianna became another name on a growing list. Born on September 22, 1999, Brianna Destiny McCoy was the daughter of Camille Prince and legendary Jamaican dancehall artist Ricky Trooper, real name Garfield McCoy. While her dad made waves in the music world, Brianna wasn't trying to ride anyone's coattails. She was focused on being her own woman, focused on family, real friends, and raising her little boy right. Her people called her Brie Balenciaga. She wasn't about drama or flashing cameras. She was soft-spoken, loving, and full of light. Her cousins adored her for her calm vibe, even though she came from fame. Brianna had that rare kind of energy, the kind that made people smile just by walking into the room. She was doing her thing too, working at In the City, a trendy tapas spot known for wild weekends and stylish crowds. She served bottles, but she carried herself with pure class. Still, behind the smiles and work hustle, something was missing. And that's when Derek Francis came into the picture. Derek, also known as Ainsley Forbes, was 41 years old. That's almost double Brianna's age. And from the jump, something felt off. He didn't just bring drama, he was drama. Brianna was holding it down, no matter how messy things got. She and Derek were caught up in that deep, intense kind of bond, the kind that starts with sparks and slowly burns out control. At first, being with him gave her something new, a sense of love, family, and purpose. She threw herself into motherhood like a warrior. Her little boy Xander, he was her whole world. She was focused, grinding to give him a better life, keep him safe, and build something real. But no matter how hard she tried to ignore it, the cracks in their relationship were growing. And deep down, she couldn't forget Derek's past. He wasn't just any guy. He was a convicted felon with a long rap sheet. Originally from Jamaica, he'd been living in Bridgeport for a while, and he was already on the police's radar. Cops had shown up to their home more than once. What started as affection twisted into tension. Friends and neighbors could hear the fights behind closed doors, low arguments, slammed doors, and the kind of stress that you can feel through the walls. People around her knew there was something toxic happening, but Brianna kept holding on. Maybe for love, maybe for hope, maybe just for her son. But the waiting made it worse. Things kept escalating. On February 23, 2023, the police were called out again for another domestic dispute. This wasn't new. It was just more proof of what people close to her already feared. The situation had turned dangerous, but Brianna wasn't just sitting still. She had finally had enough. She ended the relationship and started taking her power back. Her family noticed the change. That old spark was gone, and what remained was stress, fear, and control. But just because the relationship ended didn't mean the danger disappeared. Brianna was moving in silence, doing everything she could to stay safe. After her death, while cleaning out her apartment, her mother Camille found something heartbreaking, a handwritten to-do list. In between daily errands and reminders was one haunting task: apply for gun permit. That's right, Brianna had been scared, and she was trying to protect herself, but she never got the chance. On April 6th, just before noon, a neighbor at the Coach Light Square condos heard yet another argument from Brianna's place. They were used to the tension, but this time, it was different. They heard Brianna crying out, begging for it to stop. Her voice rose in fear, then silence, followed by a single terrifying gunshot that echoed through the building. Moments later, that same neighbor saw Derek walking out the front door, calm, cold, like nothing had happened. She finally confronted him, told him straight up he needed to stop putting hands on Brianna. Derek looked her in the eye and said he knew, and apologized. Then he just walked away. Shaken, the neighbor rushed inside to check on Brianna, and what she found was beyond tragic. Brianna was lying still on the floor near her son's playpen, blood beneath her. Xander was in his playpen, frozen, silent, eyes wide with shock. The neighbor screamed and called the police immediately. By the time officers arrived, it was too late. Brianna had been shot 4 times in the head and upper body with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. It was just before 11:30 a.m. Xander hadn't been physically harmed, but emotionally, he'd seen it all. He was left inside that apartment for who knows how long, alone with his mother's body. That kind of trauma, it stays forever. Brianna McCoy was gone, and the work had just begun. Police sealed off the apartment. Detectives swarmed the scene, snapped photos, picked up bullet casings, and traced every detail around where Brianna had fallen. But the most important piece of the puzzle had already slipped through their fingers. Derek Francis had disappeared. Bridgeport PD didn't waste a second. They named him the prime suspect immediately. He was the last person seen with Brianna and had a history of violent run-ins with her. An arrest warrant was issued within hours, but Derek was already gone. Every minute made him harder to find. Cops widened the search fast. The U.S. Marshals Violent Fugitive Task Force joined in. It was official. Derek Francis was now a fugitive. Dangerous, armed, and on the run. The chase was on and cops weren't backing down. For days, the manhunt for Derek Francis kept heating up, leads popping off in every direction. Then, on April 11th, 5 days after Brianna's murder, officers in Cuyahoga County, Ohio, pulled over a car tied to one of Francis's people. And guess who was inside? Derek himself. But instead of giving up, he bolted. He didn't get far though, just a short sprint before he was tackled and cuffed. They booked him at the Cuyahoga County Jail, labeling him a fugitive from justice. At first, he tried to play games, refusing to waive extradition, dragging things out. But after a few days, that act ended. On April 17th, under tight armed escort, Francis was sent back to Connecticut. Now it was the state's turn to get to work, and they weren't about to let this one slide. At his first court appearance, the prosecution wasted no time laying it all out. Brianna's family was right there in the courtroom, eyes locked on the man who had shattered their world. The vibe in that room? Heavy, tense. Every word carried weight, and the facts didn't lie. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment slip. It was cold. It was planned. Police had found the murder weapon, a 9mm semi-automatic, stuffed under the passenger seat of that car. Ballistics confirmed it matched the shell casings from Brianna's apartment. But it wasn't just the gun that nailed him. Witnesses stepped up too. A neighbor had heard the final argument and saw Francis run out. Others backed it up, sharing how often they'd heard yelling, fights, and signs that things were spiraling long before that tragic day. Piece by piece, the picture got clearer. Francis decided to be tried by a panel of 3 judges instead of a jury. And his lawyer? He went for a risky defense, claiming Francis had acted under extreme emotional disturbance. Basically, he wasn't in his right mind and didn't mean to kill. If that stuck, it could have dropped the charge from murder to manslaughter. But that defense wasn't easy to prove. To even get a shot at it, they needed expert backup. A psychiatrist was brought in to examine Francis to see if there was any truth to the breakdown claim. The defense said the rocky relationship had pushed him over the edge, that this was about emotions, not intent. But while that report was pending, the prosecution stayed on offense. They weren't buying it. In fact, they were ready to break it all down. Francis had already switched up his story twice. First, he claimed Brianna had the gun. Then he changed it, saying he found the weapon while searching for cash, claiming she'd hidden it. The inconsistencies were glaring. Prosecutors said it straight. Francis was twisting the narrative to fit a defense, not telling the truth. And the more they dug, the more history came to light. Brianna had made multiple calls to the police about him. Just weeks before her death, there was a confirmed domestic call. She had left him. She was reclaiming her peace, planning a new chapter. Prosecutors believe that's exactly why he pulled the trigger, to stop her from breaking free. The courtroom heard from everyone: law enforcement, forensic teams, Brianna's family, and neighbors who had lived through the chaos next door. They even entered details about Xander, the trauma, the speech therapy he now needed, all of it part of the brutal legacy left behind. By the time the trial kicked off in April 2025, Francis's emotional disturbance claim was hanging by a thread. As the judges reviewed the evidence, it all stacked up against him. And when verdict day arrived, April 25, 2025, the courtroom held its breath. Guilty of murder. Just like that, the emotional breakdown defense was tossed. The court ruled that Francis had acted with full awareness. This wasn't a man who lost control. This was a man who didn't want to let go. Then came the final hammer drop, sentencing day, June 5th. Francis was hit with 55 years in prison. The punishment reflected the brutal nature of the crime, the trauma inflicted on a child, and the long road of abuse that led to that day. But even with the verdict delivered and the killer behind bars, Brianna's family still carried the weight of that loss. No sentence could bring her back. Brianna's mother, Camille Prince, showed up to almost every hearing, every brutal detail, every painful update. She sat through it all, holding her ground as the truth unfolded. And in the end, she saw the man responsible for her daughter's death sentenced to decades behind bars. But even with justice served, the damage was already done. Nothing could bring Brianna back. Her father, reggae legend Ricky Trooper, grieved publicly and in silence. On the anniversary of her murder, he spoke out. The pain hadn't faded. If anything, it had gotten heavier. His daughter didn't just die. She was taken in the worst way, right in front of her baby boy. Xander, only 18 months old when it happened, stopped speaking completely after the shooting. The trauma hit him so deep, therapists diagnosed it as a severe stress reaction. He couldn't talk, but his silence said everything. Camille confirmed that Xander was getting care, but recovery was slow. New home, new guardians, new routine. His whole world had shifted. One day, Xander will grow up and ask the hardest question: what happened to my mom? And someone will have to tell him the truth. After the tragedy, the people of Bridgeport came together. Outside the lounge where Brianna had worked, friends, family, and strangers lit candles and released pink and blue balloons into the sky. More than 40 people showed up that night. Her photos played on a screen. Her name was spoken with love. They called her strong, graceful, and focused, never chasing clout, just raising her son and holding things down quietly. But what she kept private turned out to be deadly. A GoFundMe was launched to support Xander's therapy and everyday needs. The community stepped up, sharing, donating, honoring Brianna. But money can't heal trauma. What this family needed, and still needs, is support. Not just for Xander, but for all survivors. Camille now speaks out about domestic violence, urging people to notice red flags, to speak out, to protect women trying to escape, because Brianna tried, and she still didn't make it out. Her funeral was private. No press, no noise, just the people who truly loved her, saying goodbye. It wasn't about headlines, it was about remembering the real Brianna, a daughter, a mother, a woman trying to survive. Even now, nearly 2 years later, people are still asking, how? How could someone do this to the mother of their own child? How do you walk out and leave a baby behind with their murdered mom? Those questions still haunt this case. Brianna wasn't weak. She wasn't passive. She did what so many survivors do, kept pushing, made plans, tried to protect her child. But silence worked against her. Silence let it happen. If someone you know is living through abuse, don't brush it off. Speak up, ask questions, offer help. If you hear fights, see bruises, or notice someone pulling away from the world, say something. Because silence can kill. Let Brianna McCoy's story mean something. Let it be a wake-up call. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share this video to keep her memory alive and to make sure someone else gets the help they need before it's too late.